Welcome back to Attic Lore. Tonight we walk the smog-choked, neon-lit streets of 1940s Los Angeles. It was a time of post-war boom where the Great White Way of Hollywood promised stardom to anyone beautiful enough to reach for it. But beneath the glitz of the silver screen lay a predatory underworld, a place where dreams went to die in the most horrific ways imaginable. This is the story of Elizabeth Short, known to the world as the Black Dahlia. Her death was not just a murder, it was a macabre masterpiece of violence, a calculated display of surgical cruelty that transformed a young woman into a permanent symbol of Hollywood's dark side. Over the next hour, we will dissect the life she lived, the nightmare of her final hours, and the shadow of the man who carved a permanent, terrifying smile into the history of the City of Angels. Chapter 1. The Starlet Who Never Was. To understand the horror of the end, we must understand the girl who arrived in the beginning. Elizabeth Short was born in 1924 in Boston, a child of the Great Depression. Like thousands of other young women of her generation, she was captivated by the flickering images of the cinema. She was strikingly beautiful, with porcelain skin, piercing blue eyes, and hair so dark it appeared blue-black under the California sun. By the age of 22, Elizabeth had migrated to Los Angeles. She was a soldier's girl, a woman who frequented the diners and drugstores of Hollywood, hoping to be discovered. She lived a transient life, moving between cheap hotels and the apartments of acquaintances, always one step away from the big break that never came. The press would later paint her as a man-chaser or a woman of loose morals, but the truth was far simpler and more tragic. Elizabeth Short was a girl with a broken heart, mourning a fiancé killed in the war, struggling to survive in a city that viewed beautiful women as a disposable commodity. She was last seen alive on January 9, 1947, leaving the Millennium Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. She stepped out into the night, headed toward a destination she would never reach. For 6 days, Elizabeth Short vanished. When she reappeared, she would no longer be a girl, she would be a landmark of American horror. Chapter 2. The Mannequin in the Grass. On the morning of January 15, 1947, a local mother named Betty Bersinger was walking with her young daughter through a vacant lot in Limerick Park, a quiet residential neighborhood. She noticed something white in the tall grass. Initially, Bersinger thought it was a discarded store mannequin that had been broken in half. As she moved closer, the reality of the scene shattered her mind. It was not plastic, it was flesh. It was Elizabeth Short. The scene was unlike anything the LAPD had ever witnessed. Elizabeth's body had been bisected, severed completely in half at the waist, but there was no blood. The body had been professionally drained, scrubbed clean and posed. Her torso and legs were separated by about a foot, her arms raised over her head in a grotesque, mock-artistic gesture. But the most haunting detail, the one that links this case to the deepest psychological terrors, was her face. The killer had used a knife to carve deep slits from the corners of her mouth toward her ears. This is known as a Glasgow smile. It was a deliberate, mocking grin, as if the killer wanted her to remain in a state of permanent, joyful terror even in death. The precision of the cuts, the lack of bruising, and the way the body was hemicorporectomized, cut through the lumbar vertebrae, suggested one terrifying truth: the killer was a surgeon. Chapter 3. The Birth of a Legend. The news of the murder hit Los Angeles like a physical blow. The Hearst newspapers, led by the Los Angeles Examiner, sensed a sensation. They didn't just report the crime, they branded it. The nickname the Black Dahlia supposedly came from a drugstore in Long Beach, where Elizabeth was a regular, a play on the movie The Blue Dahlia, which had been released recently. The press leaned into the noir aesthetic, dressing up the tragedy in sensationalist prose. They contacted Elizabeth's mother in Boston, lying to her, telling her that her daughter had won a beauty contest, only to reveal the horrific truth once they had her on the line to record her reaction. This was the environment of the investigation, a circus of cruelty where the victim was treated as a prop for headlines. Because the body was found clean and posed in a public lot, it was clear that Limerick Park was a dump site. Elizabeth had been murdered elsewhere, held captive for days, and then brought to the lot like an exhibition. The killer wasn't hiding. He was showing off. He was communicating with the city, using Elizabeth's body as his stationery. Chapter 4. The Black Dahlia Avenger. Most serial killers hide from the light. The man who killed Elizabeth Short stepped directly into it. On January 24th, a package was delivered to the Los Angeles Examiner. It contained Elizabeth's birth certificate, business cards, photographs, and an address book with the name Mark Hansen embossed on the cover. The contents had been cleaned with gasoline, presumably to remove fingerprints. Accompanying the items was a letter composed of words cut from newspapers reading, "Here is Dahlia's belongings. Letter to follow." Soon, more letters arrived, signed, "The Black Dahlia Avenger." The killer taunted the police, claiming they would never find him. He seemed to relish the chaos he had caused. The LAPD, already struggling with internal corruption and a lack of modern forensic tools, was overwhelmed. They processed over 3,000 suspects. They investigated doctors, dental students, butchers, and actors. But the investigation was constantly compromised by confession seekers, mentally ill individuals who wanted the fame of being the Black Dahlia's killer. Yet, among the thousands of names, one stood out. A man with the skill, the motive, and the dark psychological profile to commit such an atrocity. Chapter 5. The Doctor in the Mayan House. In recent decades, the focus of the investigation has shifted heavily toward Dr. George Hodel. Hodel was a brilliant, wealthy, and deeply disturbed physician who moved in the elite circles of Los Angeles. He was a master of surgery, known for his precision. But behind the closed doors of his home, the Sowden House, a bizarre Mayan-style fortress designed by Lloyd Wright, Hodel allegedly engaged in dark occult rituals and sadism. Hodel's own son, Steve Hodel, a former LAPD detective, spent years investigating his father after George's death. He discovered photographs in his father's private collection that appeared to show Elizabeth Short. More damning was the fact that the LAPD had actually bugged Hodel's home in 1950. On the secret recordings, Hodel was heard saying, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia, they couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead." The theory suggests that Hodel killed Elizabeth in the basement of the Sowden House, using his surgical skills to bisect her and carve the smile. He then used his high-level connections in the LAPD and city government to ensure the investigation never reached his door. The Black Dahlia Avenger wasn't just a killer, he was a man who believed he was untouchable. Chapter 6. The Darker Psychology of the Smile. Why the smile? Why the bisection? Psychologists who have studied the case suggest that the killer suffered from a profound God complex. To bisect a body is to show absolute mastery over human anatomy. To carve a smile is to reclaim the victim's identity, forcing them to reflect the killer's own dark amusement. The Black Dahlia case is the ultimate example of organized, lust-driven homicide. The killer didn't just want Elizabeth dead, he wanted to transform her. He wanted to turn a living, breathing woman with hopes and fears into an immortal statue of horror. In a way, he succeeded. We don't remember Elizabeth Short for the life she lived, the movies she loved, or the family she missed. We remember her as the girl in the grass. We remember the smile. The killer stole her humanity and replaced it with a legend, ensuring that his work would be discussed in hushed tones for a century. This is the true terror of the Black Dahlia. The realization that someone can be so cold, so methodical, that they can turn a human life into a permanent public nightmare without ever leaving a fingerprint. Chapter 7. The Unsolved Silence. Elizabeth Short was buried in Oakland, California, far from the neon lights that drew her to her death. Her killer likely lived a long, prosperous life, perhaps even watching the movies and reading the books inspired by his crime. The case remains open at the LAPD, but it is a ghost of an investigation. DNA evidence, if it ever existed, has been lost or contaminated over the decades. The suspects are all dead. The witnesses are gone. What remains is the question of Hollywood itself. Was the killer a lone madman, or was he a product of a city that taught men that they could own anything, including a woman's life, if they had enough power? The Black Dahlia is the shadow cast by the Hollywood sign. She is the reminder that for every name in lights, there is a name carved in a tombstone, and sometimes the price of fame is a smile you never asked for. Closing the ghost of Leimert Park. As the sun sets over Los Angeles today, the vacant lot in Leimert Park is gone, replaced by homes and families who likely never think of what happened there in 1947. But for those who know the story, the air still feels a little colder in that corner of the city. Elizabeth Short's story is a warning about the fragility of dreams and the depth of human depravity. She was a girl who wanted to be seen, and in the end, the world couldn't look away. Now we want to hear from you. Do you believe Dr. George Hodel was the Avenger? Or do you think the killer was someone the police never even considered? Why do you think this case, above all others, continues to haunt our collective consciousness? Let us know your theories in the comments below. If you enjoy diving into the shadows of the unexplained and the dark history of our world, make sure you hit that subscribe button and join us next time on Attic Lore. Remember, the brightest lights always cast the longest shadows.